What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors sits down for what should be a friendly chat, but instead faces the most disrespectful host in television history? In just 37 seconds, Jonathan Ross managed to destroy his own reputation with a comment so shocking, so completely out of line, that it left Tom Hanks speechless and the entire studio audience gasping in horror. Tom Hanks walked onto that stage, like he always does, with that warm smile that has made millions of people around the world feel like they know him personally. He waved to the crowd, shook Jonathan's hand, and settled into the guest chair with the easy confidence of someone who has done this dance 1,000 times before. But something was different about Jonathan that night. Maybe it was the pressure from his bosses to boost ratings. Maybe it was jealousy of Tom's success. Or maybe he was just having a bad day. Whatever it was, you could see it in his eyes from the very first moment. There was a coldness there, a smugness that should have been a warning sign to everyone in that studio. "So Tom," Jonathan began, leaning back in his chair like he owned the world, "let me ask you something that nobody else has the guts to ask." Tom raised his eyebrows and chuckled softly. "Okay, shoot. Your movies?" Jonathan continued, his voice dripping with fake concern. "They are all the same, are they not? Nice guy saves the day. Everyone loves Tom Hanks. Is it not getting a bit boring for you, playing the same character over and over again?" The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension creeping into the room like smoke. Tom's smile faltered for just a second, but he recovered quickly. "Well, I think each character I play brings something different to the table," Tom replied diplomatically. "Whether it is Forrest Gump or Chuck Noland in Cast Away, they all have their own stories, their own struggles." "But come on," Jonathan pressed, his tone getting sharper. "You cannot seriously tell me that you think you are some great actor. You just play yourself in every movie. Same voice, same mannerisms, same everything." The camera caught Tom's face perfectly in that moment. His jaw tightened just slightly, but he kept his composure like the professional he is. "I try to bring truth to every role I play," Tom said carefully. "If that means some of my natural personality comes through, then I suppose that is just who I am as a performer." "Natural personality," Jonathan repeated, letting out a harsh laugh. "That is one way to put it. Some people might call it lazy acting." You could hear people in the audience shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This was not how these interviews were supposed to go. Jonathan was supposed to make his guests feel welcome, not attack them on live television. Tom leaned forward slightly, his voice still calm but with an edge that was not there before. "I have been fortunate enough to work with some incredible directors and fellow actors throughout my career. If they felt my performances were lazy, I do not think they would keep hiring me." "Oh, please," Jonathan scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "Directors hire you because you are safe. You are the vanilla ice cream of Hollywood. Nobody is going to complain about Tom Hanks, but nobody is going to get excited either." The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Tom's eyes narrowed, and for the first time since he sat down, his famous smile completely disappeared. "I think," Tom said slowly, his words measured and deliberate, "that you might be confusing consistency with being boring. I have always tried to choose roles that mean something, that tell stories worth telling." "Stories worth telling?" Jonathan laughed again, but this time it sounded forced, desperate. "Like what? A man talking to a volleyball? A slow man running across the country? These are not great stories, Tom. These are fairy tales for people who cannot handle real drama." The audience was getting restless now. Someone in the back actually booed, which was almost unheard of during a talk show taping. But Jonathan either did not hear it or did not care. He was on a roll now, and nothing was going to stop him. Tom sat back in his chair, studying Jonathan's face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You know what I find interesting?" he said finally. "What is that?" Jonathan asked, his voice mocking. "I came here tonight thinking we were going to have a conversation. You know, two people talking about movies, about life, about the things that matter to us. But it seems like you had a different plan." "My plan," Jonathan said, his voice getting louder, "is to ask the questions that matter, to get past all the Hollywood nonsense and get to the truth." "The truth?" Tom repeated, his eyebrows rising. "What truth is that exactly?" "The truth that you are not the great actor everyone pretends you are. The truth that your success is built on playing it safe and never taking any real risks. The truth that you are just a lucky man who happened to be in the right place at the right time." The words hit the studio like a bomb going off. The audience gasped collectively, and someone in the front row actually stood up and started walking toward the exit. This was not entertainment anymore. This was cruelty. broadcast live to millions of people around the world. Tom sat perfectly still for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried more power than all of Jonathan's shouting combined. "Lucky," he said, nodding slowly. "You think I am lucky?" "That is exactly what I think," Jonathan shot back, clearly thinking he had won some kind of victory. "Well," Tom said, standing up from his chair with a calmness that was somehow more intimidating than any angry outburst could have been, "let me tell you what I think about luck." The studio went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the camera operator stopped moving, afraid to miss a single second of what was about to happen. Tom Hanks, the man who never loses his cool, the actor who has charmed his way through decades of interviews without a single controversy, was about to unleash something that nobody in that room was prepared for. "I was lucky," Tom began, his voice steady but carrying a weight that made everyone lean forward in their seats, "to be born to parents who taught me the difference between right and wrong. I was lucky to grow up understanding that treating people with respect is not optional. It is basic human decency." Jonathan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but the smug smile was still plastered on his face. He clearly thought this was going to be some kind of feel-good speech that he could tear apart. "I was lucky," Tom continued, taking a step closer to Jonathan's desk, "to work with directors who believed in me when I was nobody. Lucky to have colleagues who taught me that this business is about storytelling, not about tearing other people down to make yourself feel important." "Oh, come on," Jonathan interrupted, his voice shrill and desperate. "You are not going to lecture me about the business, are you? I have been doing television longer than you have been making movies." Tom stopped walking and looked directly into Jonathan's eyes. The camera zoomed in on both their faces, and the contrast was striking. Tom looked calm, dignified, powerful. Jonathan looked sweaty, nervous, like a bully who just realized he picked on someone who could fight back. "You have been doing television," Tom said slowly, "but I am not sure you have been doing it right." The audience erupted in applause, but Tom raised his hand and they immediately went quiet again. He was not done yet. "You want to talk about luck?" Tom asked, his voice getting stronger with each word. "Let me tell you what real luck looks like. Real luck is having the chance to make movies that make people feel something. Real luck is being able to tell stories that matter to families, that bring people together instead of tearing them apart." "Those are just movies," Jonathan protested weakly. "They are not real life." "You are right," Tom nodded. "They are not real life. Real life is what is happening right now, in this studio, on this stage. Real life is a man sitting behind a desk thinking that being cruel makes him clever. Real life is an audience watching someone they respected lose their dignity on live television." Jonathan's face was getting red now. The smugness was gone, replaced by something that looked like panic. "I am just doing my job," Jonathan stammered. "I am asking the tough questions that other interviewers are too scared to ask." "Tough questions?" Tom repeated, and for the first time since this whole thing started, he actually smiled. But it was not his usual warm smile. This was something colder, more dangerous. "You think calling someone lazy and untalented are tough questions? You think insulting your guests is journalism?" "I think," Jonathan said, trying to regain some of his earlier confidence, "that people deserve to know the truth about celebrities, that you are all just regular people who got lucky." "Regular people," Tom said, nodding thoughtfully. "You know what? You are absolutely right about that. I am a regular person. I put my pants on one leg at a time just like everyone else. I have good days and bad days. I make mistakes. I am not perfect." Jonathan looked confused, like this was not going the way he expected. "But being regular," Tom continued, "does not mean being lazy. Being human does not mean being untalented. And being successful does not mean I have to sit here and let someone disrespect me on television just because they have a microphone and a camera." The audience was on the edge of their seats now. This was better than any movie they had ever seen, because it was real, it was raw, it was Tom Hanks showing a side of himself that nobody knew existed. "You want to know what I think the real problem is here?" Tom asked, leaning against Jonathan's desk like he owned the place. "What?" Jonathan asked, and his voice was barely a whisper now. "I think you are angry. I think you are angry because you have been doing this job for years, interviewing successful people, watching them live their dreams while you sit behind this desk night after night, asking other people about their accomplishments instead of making any of your own." The words hit Jonathan like physical blows. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "I think," Tom continued relentlessly, "that you thought tonight you could make yourself feel better by trying to make me feel smaller. You thought you could tear down someone who has worked their whole life to build something meaningful, and somehow that would make you more important. That is not. Jonathan started to protest, but Tom cut him off. But here's the thing about trying to tear other people down, Tom said, his voice growing stronger and more confident with each word. It does not make you taller. It just makes you look petty and small and desperate for attention. The studio was so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning humming. Jonathan looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. The man who had started this interview full of arrogance and cruel confidence now looked like a child who had been caught doing something terrible. So let me ask you a question, Tom said, straightening up to his full height. A real tough question, not the fake ones you have been throwing around tonight. Jonathan looked up at him with eyes that showed nothing but fear now. All the swagger was gone. All the cruel confidence had melted away like snow in the Sunday. When you go home tonight, Tom continued, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife, and you look in the mirror, what are you going to see? Are you going to see a man who did something important today? A journalist who uncovered some great truth? Or are you going to see someone who used their position to be cruel to another human being for no reason other than entertainment? Jonathan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The man who had been so full of nasty comments just minutes before was now completely speechless. Because that is what happened here tonight, Tom said, gesturing to the audience that was hanging on his every word. You invited me to your show, and instead of having a conversation, you decided to attack me. Not because I did something wrong, not because I hurt someone, but because you thought it would be fun to watch me squirm. The audience was nodding now, completely on Tom's side. You could see people in the crowd looking at Jonathan with disgust, with disappointment. This was their host, the man they trusted to entertain them night after night, and he had let them down in the worst possible way. You know what the saddest part is? Tom asked, and his voice was softer now, almost gentle. It was somehow more devastating than if he had been shouting. What? Jonathan managed to whisper. I actually used to watch your show, Tom said with a small shake of his head. I thought you were funny. I thought you cared about your guests, that you wanted to help them share their stories with the world. I was looking forward to coming here tonight. Jonathan's face crumpled. You could see the exact moment when he realized what he had done, what he had thrown away for a few minutes of what he thought would be entertaining television. But instead, Tom continued, you taught me something very important. You taught me that just because someone has a television show does not mean they deserve respect. You taught me that some people will use their power to hurt others just because they can. The silence in the studio was deafening. Even the crew members behind the cameras had stopped working and were just staring at the scene unfolding in front of them. I have been in this business for a long time, Tom said, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. I have met all kinds of people. Directors who scream and throw things, producers who care more about money than art, actors who think they are better than everyone else. But you know what I have never encountered before tonight? Jonathan shook his head weakly. Someone who seemed to take actual pleasure in trying to make another person feel bad about themselves. Someone who thought that cruelty was clever, that meanness was entertaining. Tom walked back to his chair, but he did not sit down. Instead, he picked up the small microphone that had been clipped to his shirt and set it gently on the table between them. I came here tonight to talk about my new movie, Tom said, his voice steady and calm. To share some stories, maybe make people laugh, hopefully give your audience a good time. That is what these shows are supposed to be about, right? Entertainment that brings joy, not pain. Tom, Jonathan finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we could start over? Tom looked at him for a long moment, and you could see him considering it. For just a second, it seemed like maybe he would give Jonathan another chance. Maybe they could salvage something from this disaster. But then Tom shook his head. You know what? Tom said, and there was finality in his voice that everyone in that studio could hear. Some things you cannot start over. Some words, once they are said, they are out there forever. And the person who said them, they showed you who they really are. Jonathan looked desperate now, like a drowning man watching his last lifeline float away. But I was just trying to, Jonathan started, but Tom held up his hand. You were trying to what? Tom asked. Entertain people by being cruel? Make yourself look smart by making me look foolish? What exactly were you trying to do that makes any of this okay? Jonathan had no answer. How could he? There was no explanation that would make sense, no excuse that would justify what he had done. The truth is, Tom said, looking directly into the main camera, speaking now not just to Jonathan but to everyone watching at home, we all have choices to make every single day. We can choose to build people up or tear them down. We can choose to be kind or to be cruel. We can choose to use whatever power we have to make the world a little bit better, or we can use it to make other people feel small. He turned back to Jonathan one last time. "Tonight, you made your choice," Tom said simply, "and now I am making mine." With that, Tom Hanks walked off the stage, not in anger, not in a huff, but with the quiet dignity of a man who knew his own worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. The audience erupted in applause, but Tom did not turn around to acknowledge it. He just walked through those curtains and out of the studio, leaving behind one of the most shocking moments in television history. Jonathan sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the empty chair where Tom had been sitting. The applause died down, and the studio fell silent again. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of Jonathan's humiliation. Finally, someone from the production crew whispered something in Jonathan's ear. He nodded numbly and looked into the camera. "We will be right back," he said, his voice hollow and defeated. But everyone watching knew the truth. There was no coming back from this.